Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Introduction to Labels in Mosaic. We're going to be talking about labels, obviously in Mosaic, how to print them, how to create them, where to modify them. Ken and I plan on going over a couple different label styles, so I hope you guys enjoy it. I just want to, before we start, there is a Q&A button down at the bottom of the Zoom controls. If you click on that, you should be able to ask questions, and we're going to try and get to those as many as we can during the webinar. Yeah. So again, my name is Matt, and I'm joined here with Ken. So Ken, how you doing, man? You here?
I'm doing great as always, Matt.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks. So we have a job open here in Mosaic. It's just a small kind of batch of cabinets. And I want to go over where the kind of starting where do you find the labels? How do you print labels? So if we go to File, Print, this is where you're going to find your print label option. So in here, if you drop down the menu, you have a few kind of preset labels that come default with Mosaic. If you click on the pencil, you're going to find the template editor. Now, in here, if we drop down the menu, you'll find some additional labels. Now, there's labels in here that are going to show up that don't show up on that initial drop down, because in here we also have our nested labels. Now, Ken's going to go over the nested labels in a little while here, but just so you know, in order to be able to print these nested labels, you do have to have the NBM add-on. If you're an enterprise customer, you're already going to have that. But yeah, that'd be something you'd have to log into your Syncly account and just add that to your license. So just wanted to discuss the overall layout. Let's just expand this. The overall layout of the template editor. So if you've ever got a chance to get into the multi-print template editor, you're going to notice this looks almost identical. You have some CAD tools here at the top. Now, a lot of these were added with version 14. So if you're not on the current version, you may notice that some of these don't look quite the same. If you highlight any of these, or many of these different icons, you'll see in brackets, they have a short form. That's going to be your hotkey for creating or for moving, drawing lines, creating arcs, and so on. It's also where you're going to find your text tool, and you have leader line with text. And there's also this QR, which Ken's going to let you guys know what this is about here in a while. The very so the top here we can see that we have our cabinet is our type for our label currently. Working over to the right hand side, we have some of our panning and zooming options. There's also a zoom extent. So if we've zoomed in on our label, and you need to zoom out completely, you can just click on the zoom extents, and that's going to take you to the full extent of that label. This grid, if we click on this is going to be for the label border. So I right now have the opacity set to 0. If you were to crank up the opacity on here, you can actually have it so that when you're adding splits on your label, they'll actually show up in the label itself. So I like to typically draw that stuff in. I like to keep the cells, so you can't see them that way. When I print the label, there's no lines that I'm not necessarily wanting to show up on that label. All right. So down at the bottom here, you have an add option, copy, delete, rename. So this will be for adding or deleting new labels. You can also export labels and import labels. So if you've worked on a label or had someone else work on a label from another Mosaic, you can actually export the label and send it to them, and they can import the label into the software. We click on the label setup. In here is where you can set up your label. So right now, this current label is a cabinet style label. So cabinet label would be labels that you would be printing like post assembly. So if you're looking to print labels that you have like a QC label, or if you just wanted a cabinet label with a number and maybe some information, you can set up a cabinet label and you'd be able to print those and stick them to the back of your cabinets. You also have part labels. So part labels, that's going to be just for individual parts. Now, this is not to be confused with the nested labels. These would just be printed from Mosaic, and it's just going to give you one label per part. There's then nested labels, which, like I mentioned earlier, Ken's going to go over. Drawer and door subassembly. These would be for individual door and drawers. So if you are a shop that's just cutting doors and drawers, maybe you're using the order entry, to make those doors or drawers, you can create labels for those, and you're able to print those out just for the subassemblies themselves. Paperless shop and the paperless shop nested. These are going to be the same as the labels above here, but they're just able to be exported and printed from your paperless shop app if you guys have that add-on. Now, label sizing, we do have some standard labels in here that you can use. Any of the labels, and actually before I get started, let's create a new one. We're going to add a label, and we'll just call this cabinet label. So I can see it's a cabinet label, and we have our width and our length. So I can, or width and our height. If I drop down this menu and select a label, let's grab this 4x3. If I click on use, it's going to automatically populate that label size. And let me just, okay. We also have the label margins down here. So your left and right margins, top and bottom margins. So, if you find that maybe if your printer isn't lined up perfectly, you want to give yourself a little bit of padding, you can add some padding here for those labels. You also have the ability to print landscape right here. So this is great, for part labels if you needed to have the label print out in a landscape orientation. All right, let's hit OK. And so we can see that we have our label. Now the cell widths. So again, like the multi-print title block editor, you have some horizontal and vertical splits here, as well as multi-splits. So you're able to select, an opening, add a split in here, and then you can size the width and the height of the cells to suit. Okay, let me just delete that one for right now. And actually, my opacity, let's set this to 0. Okay, there we go. Now moving over to the left hand side here. Now I have the label type set to cabinet. So with that, we're going to get some unique drawing and variable options depending on the type of label. So the cabinet label, if I look at drawings, this gives me the ability to add floor plan, room elevations. We have the front assembly views, the interior views, and then the front, top, left, right, and back views of the cabinet. So you have the ability to just drag and drop, one of these views in. You can size it, right, to fit, however large you want it on your label. And there's actually a preview up here. So if you ever wanted to see, what that's doing, if you click on the preview, it's going to show you, what's showing up on that label. So here you can see the floor plan is showing me, it's highlighting where the cabinet is on the floor plan. Might be nice for installation, right? You put a label on the back of the cabinet and the installer or the delivery guy knows exactly where to dump that cabinet when they get to site. Symbol library. So this is just like multi-print. Anything you add from multi-print will show up in here. So you're going to have all the same symbols that you have there. And then the variables. Now, the cabinet type doesn't have any unique variables that go with it. I'm going to call these sort of the default variables that are going to be included with every label. So you have default for your current dates, your label number, label count. There's your job tab variables. So these are all items that would pull from that first page in Mosaic. So when you're filling out your customer name, your address, phone number, email, your settings tab, right? So you can see there's some different settings in here that you may need to bring in. The room tab. So we have, some room names in here. And then about, so if you wanted to bring your shop name or your shop email, you could bring those in as well as variables. Down at object settings, let's minimize this. Object settings is going to control your line weights, your line colors, your text style, your text sizing, your text colors. You can change the dimensions. So any dimensions you add onto here, you can set the alignment, you can set the type of dimensions. Recommend that you get this thing dialed in and save it, so that you're able to load this and just maybe always run the same type of text with your labels. All right, so let's create a label together. So I'm going to modify this one. My shop, we're making a post assembly label. This will be almost a checklist for my guys to look at. They can check off certain things that were done and make sure that the cabinet is good to go on the truck. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to split this horizontally once, and I'm going to select this top cell, and we'll set the height of this to half inch. Now I may want to bring my logo in for this label because this is a label potentially my customer is going to see. So we're going to go to the symbol library and I'm going to grab my logos. And we have the mosaic with blocks. So we'll bring that one in. And I'm just going to shrink this down. And if I use my M command, that's going to switch the cursor to a move. And so I can actually move this right into position. And then I might just shrink that down a little bit more. There we go. Okay, first step. So I want to think about certain things I'm going to need for this label. So obviously with variables, I'm going to want my job information. So let's get our job name. So I'm just going to drag and drop this in. The only other thing that may be a variable in this could be possibly the would be the cabinet name, the cabinet number. So I'm going to choose the cabinet assembly number. Now this assembly number is going to include the room number and the cabinet numbers to be like your R1, C1 numbers. This is what's going to be important here. We do have, like I mentioned, other variables in here. And I honestly would just, if you're playing around with these for your first time, make a big label, drag and drop a lot of these in because you can move these into place. And then click on that preview and you're going to see, what's coming through. Now this job only has one room. So it's just coming through as cabinet number 1. But if this is a multi-roomed job, it would be showing that R1, C1. All right. So I'm going to split this top section and we'll make the left side, we'll say 5/8. And what I'm going to do with this job name is I'm going to right click and just expand this this job name to fit the cell that's above. Now I'm going to also there's a little bit of padding on here, so I'm actually just going to stretch this out to fit exactly. Now this is a variable. This name, the size of this name could change. If you have a customer that's got maybe a really long last name, or maybe you've put an address in for the job name, you want to make sure that whatever you enter in here is not going to like blow up and not show up properly on this label. So I'm going to right click this, edit the text alignment and rotation, and I'm going to make sure to check fit to bounds. This is just going to ensure that as the name grows, the text will actually shrink down in size and be able to still fit inside of this field. Okay. Now we got our cabinet assembly number, but we're going to make some more splits. So let's grab the opening and I'm going to put another split in here. This lower section will make the height of this 3/8. Yeah, that looks fine. Now I'm going to add my cabinet number, my assembly number here. But we're going to split this one more time and we'll set the cell width of this to 3, let's go 1/2 inch. Perfect. And I'm going to add a text box to this section here. And I'm just going to say cab number. Okay. Now, if I right click this, edit text alignment, and I'm going to center this and we'll put it right in the middle. This is not a variable, so not super important that I fit to bounds, but you can check that. I'm just gonna leave it off just to show you what it does. And then we're gonna add another split and we'll make this 1/2 inch as well. And I'm gonna move this over and we're just gonna right click, expand to fit cell. Again, I'm just going to stretch that label and right click, edit text. We're going to make sure it's in the center, in the middle, and we're going to fit this one to bounds. Now, one thing I want to point out, there's an option over here for true font size. I've had some questions before what this does. So you have true font size versus variable size. So if I change this, so that's the true font size, right? If I'm using the true font, like say I wanted this number to be really big, right? And I didn't want it to shrink down. I knew the number was never going to get larger than what's going to fit the space. I can show the true font size here. So this is what the font size would be. But if I wanted to be able to see, what that was when I'm working with the template, I can switch it over to variable name. So it's going to show up with the variable name here, but it'll still set that text into whatever size you've put it here to make sure that it's fitting what you're trying to make it look like. But let's go back to fit to bounds. All right, on this side here, I'm going to just add a text, and we'll say this one was assembled by, and we're going to add some space to put a signature. Okay. And then the same thing, we're going to right click this, edit alignment, and it's going to be on the center and the middle. Cool. All right, so now we're going to zoom out a little bit, and let's add another cell to the bottom here. I'm going to set the height of this to, let's say, 3/4. And in the middle, I'm going to add some options with like a checkbox. So this is where I'm going to have my space to be able to maybe put a few items that are really important, like say adjustable shelves. We want to make sure those are always there. We want to make sure that there's bumpers on the cabinet. Has the cabinet been cleaned? Has the handles been installed? Right. So I'm going to split this once vertically, and then we'll do a multi-split of 3 sections horizontally for each side. Just gives us a nice equal split. So let's start with the first one. I'm going to add some text in here. And we're going to say this one is for bumpers. I'll add a text in here, and we'll say cleaned. We'll add another text. We'll say handles. Another text here. Leg levelers. My shop does leg levelers, so it's kind of nice to have that. Have they been installed? Are they on the cabinet? And then lastly, adjustable shelves. Can't count how many times adjustable shelves have not shown up to the job site. So nice to just, if you guys are shipping out your adjustable shelves inside your cabinet, you have that checkbox. So let's align these guys now. So same thing, edit. We're going to go to the center and the middle. And do the same thing here. Center and middle. Align this one here to the center and the middle. Center and middle. And lastly here. Okay. Now, lastly, I'm going to add a variable. Now, I've added a variable under the job tab of job notes installer. I want to show you where you can add these yourself. So let me just save this and hit OK. I'm gonna hit cancel. So if we go to the settings tab, room notes. Nope, sorry. The job tab, the job notes. Here I have an install that I added. So I just want to show you, if I delete this and hit OK, and we go back into the print labels, click on the pencil, and I look at those variable options again under the job tab, I now no longer have that variable here. So this is a cool way to add your own custom variables that you may have for your job. In this case, we're going to add that back. So we're going to go back to the job notes, and I'm going to manage the fields, and we're going to add a short text. Okay. And the field name is going to be installer, because I have different installers that work on these projects. And the variable name is going to be underscore installer underscore. So it's going to be a blank. You can add any name you like in here. This really is just kind of up to you. My installer today is Peter. We go back to File, Print Labels, click on the pencil, and I go back to those variables. Under the Job tab, you can see there's those job notes. So if I bring this one in, and we're going to center, middle. I have to actually expand to fit the cell. Now this one we may say, because this could change, so we're going to make fit to bounds. And I'm going to give myself a little bit of room on this one because I don't want it to eat into where I'm going to eventually be putting my checkboxes. Okay. And if we preview this, you can see it's pulling that that name. And you know what? I'm going to actually let's change this. I'm going to grab a text and we're going to say installer. And then we're going to say job job underscore notes underscore install underscore and special bracket. Okay. And we'll take this one out. Now let's expand to fit, and we are going to fit to bounds. And we're going to edit this to be center and middle. Again, we'll just bump up that padding a little bit. So now again, if we go back to that preview, you can see that it's showing the installer name. So if we change that name, obviously that variable will change. All right. Lastly, let's add one final note at the bottom here. And this one, I'm just going to put a little disclaimer. We're going to say that this box, capital, this box has been reviewed for accuracy and is free of blemishes and damage. We'll give ourselves a little bit of space to put someone's name. A little bit more. Okay, and I'm going to then just align that center and middle. You know what? Let's go free of. If I hold shift and hit enter, I should be able to give that a little bit of space in between. There we go. All right. So let's add our checkboxes. So I'm going to use the CAD tool for this. So we'll grab the rectangle. Let me just minimize some of these. Okay. I'm going to grab the rectangle, and I'm going to make a rectangle that is 0.625 by 0.625. And I'm going to move this into my drawing. Now I can bump up the line width of this if I wanted it to be a bit more pronounced there. So there we go. And let's move this into position. Right there, looks good. And little trick, I'm just going to grab my line and I'm going to draw a line from here to here. This way, then I can now copy this guy. Control C. We're going to go Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V. Can now move these guys into the corners so they're all referencing the same spot. If you don't know, I'm just selecting one line, holding Control, grabbing the box so I can select multiple items here, hitting the M, grabbing it from the point. It's going to snap to those points, and it's going to automatically snap to that corner. And then now I can come in and just delete those extra lines. All right. So it's looking pretty good. Last thing I might do is maybe just add some lines in here to help sort of define the areas. I mean, this label looks pretty good as is, but if I was to use the grid, it's going to make every line in here darker. So I'm going to opt to use the CAD tool for this. So we're going to add a line here, here, here. I probably could use the polyline for this, but that's okay. There. I'll put a line across here. Put a line across here. Be one here. Here. Line here, and then right here. Save that, have a preview. There you go. So there's a great label to throw on the back of your cabinet. Nice one to just check off, before it goes out the door. I think it's a nice feature for your customer, right? They see that every single box has been sort of reviewed and looked over by your guys. So just a nice bit of extra quality. So yeah, that was a cabinet label. So Ken's going to take us through the process to create a nested label now.
All right, thanks, Matt. Looks great. Okay, so we have a cabinet label, and this label would be meant to put on the back of our assembled cabinets, but now we need to think about our parts. So let's say we have a shop, we have a CNC, we're nesting these parts, and we need to create a nested label that's going to pull in those proper variables. So what we'll do is we'll come down and we're going to add a new template. Now we can either come down here and add a template using the add button. We can also use the drop down in here and use the add template option there. We're going to give our template a name. I'm going to call this nested label webinar. We'll say okay. Now again, I get that same label setup. The first thing I want to do is make sure that my label type is the correct type. Since this is going to be a nested label for optimized parts, I'm going to want to make sure I select this as a nested label. Next, I'm going to select my label size. And although I do have these standard dimensions down here, I can't find my label size down here. I'm using a 3 1/8 by 2 1/8 label. So I can't use these, but I can customize my own size. So I'm going to come into my label width and I'm going to change that to 3.125 and my height is going to be 2.125. Once I'm happy with that, I can move on to my margins. So I don't want my margins to be this big. I'm happy with a 0.1 margin. So I'm just going to manually change these. We're just going to come in 0.1. We're also going to do that for our top and bottom margin. And of course, we're going to be printing these labels in a landscape orientation. So we want to make sure we check that box there. Once we're happy, we can say okay. And now we have our blank label. Now, when we're designing our labels, we kind of want to get a general idea of the design we want to do. So you could use Google to kind of look at other labels on the internet and get some general ideas that you could kind of follow along with. Or you can just play with your label. You can, try different layouts until it's aesthetically pleasing to you and all of that information is populated into the correct areas you want. So up to you. I have come up with a basic plan for my label. Essentially, I want a drawing of my part over here where I can have an arrow pointing to the edges on this part that need to be edge banded. So I'm going to create a cell on this side that I'd be able to place that drawing in. And as Matt mentioned, we do have the splitting buttons up here. So let's split this vertically. So now I have a left and right cell. On this right side, I don't need this to be half of the label width, so I'm going to change this to 1 inch wide. And I'm going to put my variables in here. We're just going to do a simple label. We're just going to have our information coming across on lines here. So let's scroll up to our variables and we will take a look at the options we have. All right, so just like a cabinet label, we have the variables in here, and a lot of these variables are going to be the same. The defaults are still going to bring in your date, label, number, count, the units you're using. The job tab is still going to bring in those variables from the job tab in Mosaic. And then we have the product editor, and this is where we can bring in cabinet specific information. The about is going to be our own information, so our shop name and shop email. We could add those to the label, but since this is a part label, I don't need to add contact information to this since really only my employers are going to be seeing this label. Then we have parts and optimizer section down here. If we take a look at the parts, we have the part name and part shorthand name. At the bottom, we also have a part comment. Now, let me show you where these are going to be generated from because you can customize these. So let's save this label. We'll say OK, and we'll close our print label dialog. we're going to head to Libraries, Parts. Now we can see here, report name. This is what's going to populate with that part name. So you can customize these. So you can click here and, add whatever you'd like to that. You can change the name completely if you want. And then the shorthand name is going to be your label name. So you can customize that as well. You're just going to create an abbreviation for that part to save some real estate. And then you have the part comment. So this is where those comments are going to come from if you use the part comment variable. And these are the default comments that are going to populate with the parts, but you can customize those comments on a part level while you're designing your job. So keep that in mind. So comment can be handy to add to your labels. Let's cancel out of here and we'll jump back into our label editor. Again, to get there, we're going to go File, Print, Print Labels. Then we get our cabinet label print dialog. We won't hit OK because we're not looking to print a cabinet label right now. So we're going to jump to our edit button. All right, so let's jump back to our webinar label. And now I need to, actually we'll go through the rest of these variables. So in our parts, we have the name and the shorthand name. You have the part size, part width, and part length. So part size is going to combine the width and length of that part. So for instance, 24 by 30. Part width is simply just going to bring in your width. So that would just say 20. Part length is just going to bring in your length. So that would be 30. So if you just want to separate these dimensions, if you had like a custom layout or something, you can bring them in separately. Then we have the part material. What material is this part cut out of? Part material abbreviation. If you're using abbreviations, you'd be able to populate that on your label. We have edge band info. This would be like an edge banding legend. Essentially, it's going to give you 4 numbers to represent your edges, and it's going to give you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 banding type on each edge. Opening letter. This is going to tell Mosaic what, let's say we're doing a 4-drawer bank, and we are doing matching grain on there. So when we install those drawer fronts on, we want to make sure that the grains are installed in order. So an opening letter can be handy for that because then our top drawer is going to be opening letter A, second is B, third is C, and the bottom drawer is D. So we would easily be able to tell in which order they need to be installed on the cabinet. And then again, you have the part comment, and we've already discussed that. Below that, we have the optimizer. And this is where we can bring in the sheet number. The sheet number is going to represent which number sheet in our patterns did this part come from. So if it was cut out of the 3rd sheet, it's going to say sheet number 3. You have your part number. Part numbers are going to be unique identifiers in the optimizer. So each part gets a unique number. And it's an easy way that you can go back and reference exactly what part you're looking at. So if you had a bunch of parts that are the same dimensions, you would be able to find that exact part by referencing the job part number. You have a revision number. So let's say you generate your G code and then you had to make some changes or put some remake parts in there and you regenerated the G code. That will be a new revision. So we would be able to specify which revision of the G code that this specific part was cut with. We have our textures, and this one is going to bring in the actual path that texture is saved. Texture name only is simply going to bring in the texture name. And if you're using texture abbreviations, you would pull this one in. Run name. This is going to be for enterprise subscribers that are doing optimizer runs. So they can separate their parts into separate runs. And this is just a way to tell your crew which specific run was this part cut out of. Then we have our machine name. This would be our primary machine. So let's say we're doing a nested CNC, and then we have a horizontal boring CNC as well. Well, that's going to be a primary machine and a secondary machine. So if you have multiple machines that you switch back and forth from, you may want to specify which CNC this was cut with and maybe which secondary machine the horizontal boring was done with. Below there, let me extend this so we can see the full names on this. We have the G-code file name. Simply the G-code file name with the extension. So it's going to say the G-code file name .cix.anc, depending on what machine you're using. Then you have G-code file name with no extension. So it's just going to have the G-code file name. Then we have G-code file name with path. That's going to show us the actual path directory that G-code is filed in. So it's a way to find exactly where that file is located. If you had something set up with a network where you had to go search for that part in a specific folder. Then you have your flip variables, and that's just going to bring in the G-code file names of the flip G-codes. And then we have our secondary machine. So if we wanted to reference the G-code file name of our horizontal boring machine or point-to-point, we would be able to select that there. And again, we have the full G-code file name, no extension, and then the full path. So now that we've gone through all the variables, we know the options that we have, and now we want to bring in what we're going to want to populate on here. So the first thing is I need the job name. So what I like to do is I like to drag my variables and set them outside my label, and that helps me plan my label because then I know, okay, these are all of the variables that I have to fit into my design. So I want to bring in the job name. Next, we'll head to the product editor. I want to bring in the room name. I want to know which room this is from. I also want the cabinet assembly number. Now, the cabinet assembly number, like Matt mentioned, is going to bring in an R1C1 if you have multiple rooms. But in version 14.1, you can just bring in the cabinet number now. And that's handy. So instead of that R1C1, we would bring in our room name and then our cabinet number, and that's how we would be able to identify it. In this case, I just want to use my R1C1 number, so I'm going to bring in that variable. Next, we'll head to the Parts tab. I need to know the name of this part, so we'll drag that in. And with my part size, I want to bring in the width and length together, so I'll drag that in. We also want to know what material this part was cut out of. Let's bring in our part material. And that's about all we need in there. Let's head to the optimizer. And all I need right now is I want to know which sheet this part was cut from and the unique part number that we're going to be using on here. So I can count these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to need 8 rows for this specific label. So to keep it simple, I'm simply just going to come over to my multi-split and I'm going to split this into 8 equal sections. We'll say okay. So now we have all of our cells ready to go. Now with my job name, I am simply just going to drag this over to this box. I'm not going to put a title on this. Now, as Matt mentioned, you can click on a variable you've dragged in, and you can either use the move tool, you can come up and click it there, or you can simply just hit the letter M on your keyboard, and that's going to enable the move tool, and I'd be able to drag that into place. Now, with the move enabled, I can fine-tune the movement on here by using my arrow buttons. So if I just wanted to bump this slightly, I can use my arrow buttons on my keyboard to just make minor adjustments on there. Now, I want to expand this to fit the cell. So I need to disengage the move tool and use the selection tool. Now, the select tool, I could either hit S on my keyboard or use my space bar, or I could just come up and click the button. But for efficiency's sake, I'm just going to hit my space bar. That enables my selection tool. I can right click and expand for cell, expand to cell. Now, again, it does add that padding around here, which, you know, this is valuable real estate on this label. So I am just going to manually come and stretch that to fill the entire cell. So now we have our job name in our label, and let's make sure we select that, right click, edit text alignment, center middle, and we're going to fit to bounds just in case that job name gets a little too big. Next is going to be our room name. So with our room name, I want to create a title for this. So I'm going to split this cell, and I'm going to change the left side of that to 0.5 inches. Now what I can do is I can come up to my text tool, and I can draw a text box in here, and I'm going to type in room, space, we'll say okay. Now I can go back to my selection tool, and I'm going to drag my room name in. Now let's adjust this text again. On this one, we're going to right click, edit text alignment, center middle, fit to bounds. On this one, we're going to do the same thing, edit text alignment. I want the horizontal alignment to be in the right side. I want that to hug the right side of there, and my vertical alignment is going to be middle. I don't need to fit to bounds on here. This is a static text. It's not a variable, so it's never going to change. So we know it's always going to be the correct size as long as it looks okay in here when we're viewing this in the true font size. All right, so we can take a preview of what we have so far, and we can see Smith Residence. We have our job name coming in and also our room name. Now, there is a different way to do that besides splitting. I could just draw a text box to cover that entire cell. And I could put cab number colon space, and then I could manually type in that variable. So I'll do curly bracket, cab underscore assembly underscore num curly bracket. So I'm just manually inserting that variable into a text box rather than dragging the actual variable in. Now I'd be able to use my selection tool, edit my text alignment. I'm going to go center, middle, and then fit to bounds. Now, one thing is if this cabinet number got too long, because this is a cabinet number, it's not ever going to get too long that it's not going to fit in here. But let's say we were bringing in a room name and that room name got too long, it will also shrink the size of the title. So that's why personally I like to separate those titles so then only the room name would shrink and I can still easily visually see which line this is. So let's do the rest of our rows. We're going to split these and we'll change all of those left sides to 1/2 inch. Then we're just going to come in here. We're going to change that cell width and just get our layout prepared because we've decided how we're going to design our label. Set this one to 1/2 inch and then we have one more down here. And okay, so we are prepared. Now, because I've already brought in the assembly number variable, I'm going to delete this because I just want to keep the variables that I still need to add. So let's draw some text box. In here, we're going to say part colon. We'll say okay. Over here, we'll just put size. On this one, we're going to put our material. That's just going to bring in our material name. And then over here, because I probably don't have enough room to add the full word sheet number, it's going to clip off. I'm just going to say SH number. And I'll put a space before that hashtag. And then down here, we will put our part number. And we'll say, okay, so we need to make sure that we do get these edited to be centered. So we're going to switch that to center, middle. Actually, I'm going to set that to the right like the other ones. And we don't need to select fit to bounds on this. So we're just going to quickly go through here. I'm going to set that to the right, to the middle. Now, this can be a little monotonous setting this up, but it's worth it. You know, once you get this done and you get your label dialed in exactly how you want, it's going to be something you're going to reuse over and over again in your production. So it's worth putting the effort into this, getting it dialed in just how you like it. And then that's probably going to be the last time you touch it, unless you want to add some new variables or. All right, so we have all of our titles in there. So now we'll bring in our variables. So we'll move our part name in. We are going to grab our part size. And we're just going to go through and grab these, move them over. And I'm just using the keyboard shortcut. So shift to switch to my selection, select the variable, hit M, and then I'm able to drag that. Hit shift again to go back to selection. Grab that, M, we're going to drag that in. And then shift to go back to selection. And now I can right click, edit my text alignment. And I'll make sure actually first what I want to do is I want to expand to fit cells on all these so they are sized appropriately. And then we'll jump back into our edit text alignment. We'll make sure we have these with fit to bounds on because these are variables. So there is a risk that these come in too big and clip off of that cell. And then part of it would be unreadable, which isn't ideal. So we're going to set the rest of these to fit to bounds. And last, we have our part number. All right, let's take a preview of what we have now. So if we preview that, we now have a list of all of those variables that we wanted to bring in. And you can see, you know, the material name has shrunk a bit. It shrunk that text size a little to make sure it gets that full variable in there. Now, I have some empty real estate on this right side, and that's where I wanted to add my part drawing. So what I can do is I don't need this whole thing for my part drawing. So I'm going to split this horizontally and I'll set this top section. Actually, we'll set this bottom section to 0.75. All right, so we have a little section up here. Let's jump up to our variables again, and this time we're going to go to drawings. Now, the drawing options we have on a nested label is going to be different than the options you have on a cabinet label. So we have the part drawing. This is simply just going to bring in the part shape with the operations represented on that drawing. Sheet drawing is going to bring in an actual drawing of the sheet that this part was nested on. Now, if you're going to use sheet drawings, you may want to go to a bigger label because it's going to be hard to see. You know, if you're doing 5 by 10 sheets, that's all going to be crunched into a little small box here, which can be hard to see. So just keep that in mind. Then you have your part drawing with banding. That's going to be the part drawing with the arrows that is going to show your banding. Then we have part drawing with origin. Now, the origin is if you're using a secondary machine. That is going to show you a little L symbol showing you that that is the origin corner. So that's the corner we're going to put up against our fence in our secondary machining. And then we have a part drawing with origin and banding. So because I'm using a secondary machine and I do want to know my edge banding, I'm going to use part drawing with origin and banding. We're just simply going to drag this over to our empty cell and we're going to drop it in there. And then I can right click on that, expand to fit cell. Now I do have a little bit of space down here. So what I'll do is I'm going to split this vertically, and on the left, I'm going to set that cell width to a 1/4 inch. So that gives us a 3/4 by 3/4 box on this side. And that might be a good spot to add a QR code. To do that, I can come up to my QR code tool, select that, and then I can simply just draw a QR code in the cell that I want to fill. Now I can choose what's going to be put into this QR code. So we could put, all of the variables. You could take all of these variables and manually type them. You could add text. So you can put whatever you want behind here. But for me personally, I am going to use my part comment. So how I want this to work is I'm going to put my part comments in here. So it's not going to display on my label, but my employees would be able to scan this QR code with their cell phone. That's going to open up a notepad on their cell phone and show the variable. So that can kind of be handy to consolidate information outside of your label. So to do that, in this QR code, I'm simply going to use curly bracket, part underscore comment, curly bracket. And I'm just copying what it says here. We'll say OK, and now this QR code is going to auto-generate the part comment for each part for each label. Now I do have a little space here, and maybe that's a good place to bring in my edge band information. Now the edge band information is going to bring in those 4 numbers representing what number edge banding is going on which end, which edge. So I'm going to drag that over. Now I need to rotate this. So I could right click, edit alignment, and I could say I want to rotate that 90 degrees, but I don't want it to rotate like that because then I'm going to have to stretch this to go the correct orientation. Instead, I'm just going to use my rotate tool. I'm going to come up to the top, and I have to select a swing point and a handle point. So I'm going to select my swing point here, and I'm going to drag my handle over to this side. So now you can see I'm pivoting on that swing point I selected. Now to specify my angle, I'm just going to drag in the direction I want that angle to go, and I'm going to type in 90, hit enter, and now my variable has been rotated. Now I'll be able to use my move tool to drag this over, drop it into that cell, back to my selection, right click, expand to fit cell, and we'll zoom in and we'll drag this to fill that cell so we get rid of that padding. And then I'm going to right click and make sure we select fit to bounds. And now I have my edge band info coming in vertically. And we can see a preview there, and that's what our label is looking like. So I'm happy with that, but now I've decided that I need a label with a barcode. So I want to set up my secondary machining, which is my horizontal boring machine, to be able to scan a barcode on here and automatically pull up the secondary G-code file. Now, to set that up, it's more going to be on the machine side of how you set up that network and which folders your machine is looking at for those parts. But usually the way you're going to do that on your secondary machine, you're going to specify a G-code location with no subfolders. So all of those files are dumped into a single folder. you're going to point your machine to watch that, and then you'd be able to scan a barcode on here, and your machine would be able to pull that up. So again, that's going to be on your machine side, so you may need some help from your machine manufacturer on that, but you can pull that data from Mosaic. So I've decided I'm going to put my barcode down here, but I do have some variables in the way, so I have to make some changes here. So what I'm going to do is I will move these variables out of the way. I'm just going to drag these down so I can see what I'm doing. Now I'm going to select this divider at the bottom. We're going to delete that. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to split this into 3 equal sections vertically. Over here, I'm going to set this one to 0.5. And this one will also be 0.5. So now I have my 3 boxes. So my sheet number, I'm going to move this one up and we'll drop that there. Right click, expand to fit cell. We'll move our part number to this box. And again, we're going to right click, expand to fit cell. And on this one, we would have to edit this. So I won't expand this to fit cell. I'm just going to drag this again to fill that so this has enough real estate to come in. And then we can bring in our part number. Drag that to that cell. And we'll expand to fit the cell. So now we have a little box down here for our G-code barcode. So to do that, I'm going to need to use my G-code file name secondary. Now I'm not going to use my G-code file name secondary with path. And the reason for that is because the barcodes are barcode fonts, specifically type 39 fonts, and they're not unicoded. So essentially every digit of your G-code is going to add more and more lines to that barcode. So if your G-code file name plus with the entire path, it's probably going to make that barcode too long and it's going to be unreadable for your barcode scanner. So like I mentioned, if everything is in the same folder and your machine is watching that folder, you'd just be able to use your file name. All right, so I'm not going to drag this variable in, because when we're using a type 39 barcode, we need to open and close the variable using an asterisk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my text tool and I'm going to draw a text box on here. So for here, I can see my variable up here. So I'm going to reference that. In this text box, I'm going to say asterisk, curly bracket, G-code underscore file name underscore secondary. And then we're going to close that with a curly bracket, and then we're going to finish it off with an asterisk. And we'll say, okay. Let's make sure we set this to fit to bounds right there. And we'll also change the alignment of that to center and middle. So now we have that variable in here. Now we have to turn it to a G-code. And to turn this into, a barcode. So to turn this into a barcode, we're going to change the font. And to do that, I'm going to select that text box. We're going to come over to the text, and we're going to use the free 3 of 9. So that's a type 39 font that can bring in your barcodes. And that's it right there, free 3 of 9 extended. Once I select this, it's changed that text into a barcode. So now we are bringing in our secondary machining. If we preview this, this is what our barcode is looking like, our label is looking like so far. And I do want to separate these cells. So just like Matt did, I'm going to come up and use my CAD tools to create a manual border around here. So I'm going to go all the way around. Then we'll switch to our line tool and we'll bring in lines across these lines. And this helps with visual separation. So, in a production, you're looking at these labels pretty quickly. You don't want to have to sit and stare and find that information. So dividing everything with these boxes can just make it a little more visually easier to read. And we're going to finish it off with a line across here. And that looks good. If we take a preview of our label, we can now see what our label is looking like. Now, we're not going to get the part drawing until we get to the optimizer and actually generate a part there. And I actually want to also add a line between our sheet number and part number title. All right, so let's say we're happy with our label and we want to take it to the optimizer and see what it looks like. So we're going to hit save, okay, and then we can close the label editor. Let's jump to our cut list and we will bring some parts to the optimizer. I'm going to bring all of my material, hit optimize. Now, if you are an MBM subscriber or an enterprise subscriber, in your optimizer, you are going to see a label tab up top, and that's where we're going to be able to print our labels. Now, you're not going to see that until you optimize the parts. So I have a multiple machine setup, and this is an enterprise feature. So libraries, machine templates, I can tell Mosaic which operations go to which machines. So my part shapes are both going to be cut with my Rover K. My face operations and flip operations are also going to be cut on the Rover K, but any edge operations, so horizontal boring for my dowels, it's going to go to my BSE Echo. And you can see that up there. So let's optimize this. We'll optimize both of our materials. The export is complete for the BSE Echo. And we have our sheet patterns. Let's generate the G code for this. We'll generate the G code for everything. Okay, now that we've done that, we can see that labels tab up at the top. So if I switch to my labels tab, I'm still looking at my sheet views, and I have my label options over here on the right. If I hit my label settings, I want to make sure that this is set to the label I want to print at. So my label template, I'm going to use that drop down. We're going to come down and grab our nested label webinar. That's that 3 1/8, 2 1/8 we just designed. Down here, you'd be able to select your label printer. I don't have a label printer set up on this computer right now, but once you have one installed to the computer, you would find it in here. You'd have your label paper source. So this would be if you have a multi-spool label printer, maybe you have a left side and a right side, and you'd be able to select the paper source. So let's say we had a multi-spool, and on the left side, I'm going to print my part labels. On the right side, I'm going to print my cabinet labels. So I'd want to make sure I select this to the left side. Since we don't have a multi-spool, we don't even get a selection in here. And then we have our label layout. Are you using a roll or do you want to do a custom sheet? Then you could also reverse the roll label order. So it's just going to print in the reverse order. Now we have the print all button. So if you wanted to print all of the labels for all of your parts at once, you'd be able to come and hit the print all. We could also select a specific sheet and we could say print all, and that's just going to print every label from this sheet. And that's personally what I do is when I start running a sheet, I'm going to print all those labels so they're ready and I can just stick them on after the machine is done cutting. I can also print labels for specific parts. If I select a part and then I could hit print label, it's just going to print the label for this specific part. Now let's preview our label. If we come over, we can view the specific label for this specific part. And did we set that template? Oops. So we got to go to our nested label webinar. We're going to apply, close, and we'll review that label. And we can see our label has now come up. We have our job name, our room number, cabinet number, the part name, the size of the part, the material. We're looking at sheet 2, that's part number 9. This is going to be the barcode that we're going to scan to get that secondary G-code file name. We have our part drawing here. So we can see our origin corner symbol here. So that's the 0 origin on that secondary machining. And we're going to have to put our V-type or veneer edge banding on our front edge. And we can also see the edge banding label here, 1000. So it's 1000. So that's, explaining the edge banding to us. And then we still have our QR code bringing in that the part notes. So any custom notes you wanted to add to that part, any special operations or any special care that has to be given to that part. And that's how we would generate a label. So, you can get really creative with these. I've seen some customers do some really impressive labels with really nice layouts, visually appealing. You can change the fonts and everything. And the fonts from Mosaic are just going to be referencing your system font. So if you install a font into your Windows system, you're going to be able to find that in your object settings down there. So you can customize these to whatever you'd like.
Hey, Ken, we got a question. The QR codes, those are pretty cool. Would you be able to add a secondary G code to that QR code?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, let's jump back into our label editor. We'll switch to our webinar label. Now, this QR code, if I wanted to change what's behind here, I can simply come back into my label editor, double click on the QR code, and I get access to that text input again. So if I wanted to put a secondary G-code file name behind this, which is ideal if you have a 2D scanner. So if you have a 1D scanner, you're going to have to use a Type 39. But if you have a 2D scanner, you would be able to scan barcodes without a cell phone. So we would be able to come into our variables, optimizer, and we're just going to add that G-code file name secondary instead of our part comment. So we'll type that in, G-code underscore file name underscore secondary. And we close that with a curly bracket, and we won't forget our asterisks. Or sorry, because it would be a 2D, we wouldn't need to close this with an asterisk. So we would say, okay, and then that would be it. We'd hit save our label, and now we'd have that secondary G code coming through this barcode and our QR code.
Awesome. Jackson's asking about shorthand name and label name added in version 14. I believe that should have been previous version 14. So I'm not sure what version you're on. I can't tell you what version before 14, but looking back at the release notes, I don't see anything about that being added after version 14.
Yeah, and we have a question. How do you print the cabinet labels? So I guess, yeah, we've shown how to print the nested label, but how would we print the cabinet labels if we needed to print those?
Yeah, great question. So I'm just going to hit OK, and it's actually right here. So if we cancel that, go File, Print Labels. So we've been kind of focusing on the pencil, right? But right from here, we would just choose the label that we've created, hit OK. And that's actually another great point, because let's just quickly change this to a parts. So if you wanted to print part labels from Mosaic, again, not the same as the NBM labels, when you change that to a part label, you can see actually you have options here for the cut list to print. So you can select here, what areas you're wanting to print those part labels for.
Awesome.
We also got a question about adding our logo. So yeah, we noticed that inside of the print labels that we already had the logos here from the symbol library. So these logos, you're going to add them in. They're under the logos here. We're going to add these in. Typically, I just do it from the multi-print. So you're going to exit out of here, go into the multi-print. And from here, let's just grab a new page. I like to just kind of have a blank page. The key with adding new symbols, this is going to go for any symbols you add, is you need to make sure that you're in the correct subcategory. So we're going to move into the logos category, and I'm just going to click on import. And I have a, where are we? Mosaic branding. We'll grab a logo from in here. So let's grab this one. So once I've brought that in, I can right click and save it as a symbol. And I can say new logo. Oh, that's the wrong keyboard. Let's grab new logo. Hit OK. And it's going to save that into that subfolder of logos. A lot of times I see people add new stuff and they actually are set on the architectural and they can't figure out where they've put that part, and it's actually down at the bottom. You can actually see it's in this one as well. Yeah, and then that'll be, you'll be able to grab that then from the print labels. You'll then have that option to grab that logo from in here. If we just go back to logos, just to show you that new logo is now available inside of the labels.
Awesome. And what is the difference between part label and nested part label? So Matt did touch on that earlier, but just to re-explain that. So a part label is a non-nested label. So it's not going to be nested on a sheet with a location with a unique part number. It's simply going to be a label for your cut list in here. And you're going to come and say, I need labels for my panel stock. It's going to bring in the same information. You're just not going to have the optimizer variables for that. And then again, the nested label is for nested parts. So when you're nesting the parts on a full sheet, it just brings in that additional variable functionality to reference that unique part type and what sheet it comes from. And it also brings in all of those optimizer variables like the G code file names. So just a little bit of different function in there. So that's really the only difference. If you are using, nested table saw or CNC, you will want to use nested labels.
Awesome.
All right. So that we don't have any other questions.
Any other
Anybody
questions?
has a quick question before we end the webinar.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say thanks, guys, for the our American friends that showed up. I realize it's your guys' Thanksgiving, so appreciate you guys joining us today to follow along. Hopefully, you found some things here, interesting, and was able to help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope all of our American friends are having a great Thanksgiving holiday today. And, be sure to stay tuned for the future webinars as well. The next webinar is going to be on formula, so that's going to be an interesting one. And we have some webinars planned for the new year as well. So stay tuned to those. If you can't make the webinars, you can always watch back the recordings on our training video pages. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Keep tuned for the next webinar and enjoy your Thanksgiving.